Hey everyone, hopefully you're having a good day. My name's Andy. My channel's Finding Value. Today we're going to do our uranium market, daily market update, technical analysis update. I'm going to give you my financial opinion. Please don't use it as advice. And we're going to get in the charts here. We're probably going to have a pullback here, so that's what I'm looking at. And we're going to look at it and see what's going on. So let's look at this stuff. Let's check it out. I'm starting with the physical, and here's our chart with the physical. It's kind of an ugly looking thing. It really is. We've moved on up, and we've been chopping sideways. We have not broken up, and we have not broken to the downside in terms of physical. And sometimes the mining companies lead the physical price. So while looking at Uranium, and again, this is a weekly candlestick chart. The weekly candlestick is not done yet. We are still forming it. But looking at this, we are kind of compressing on up into it. This one also did the same thing. It compressed on up into it, and we had a pullback here. Then we came back up, and we're compressing back up into this resistance line. Is this going to pull back? If the week ends with this large down candlestick like this, engulfing the one before it, I'm going to say that it's probably going to head lower. The week isn't done yet, so I'm going to remain open on the weekly candlestick basis. Let's dive into dailies. This is the daily. We can see that we broke to the upside, paused a little bit, coming back down, and we're going to have to wait and see what this thing does. Is it going to break back up tomorrow or the rest of this week, or are we going to start flying on down in a larger pullback? I don't have that answer for you, but let's continue to look at this stuff. Zooming in on the right-hand side, this is your trend line coming up that we broke to the downside today. Clear break. So we could see some further weakening ahead of us in this sector. Looking at it, kind of some of the individual companies, we're going to see something very similar to Uranium because that's the overall. Again, this guy's looking a little bit weak. Looks like we could pull back for CCJ. Looking at NextGen, kind of from a big picture view, we want to stay above this trend line. And we can see it kind of tightening a little bit. It's just tightening up. We have a larger area here than up here between these two lines. It's a larger distance. It's tightening up a little bit. Usually when you're tightening and you're going up, it signals that we could see it could be a pretty big pullback if we break this lower trend line. Here's Fission Uranium. We were dancing on the top of this trend line where I guess we were getting a little cocky. Okay. We got pushed back into this pattern. Or uptrend channel, we should say. It's a pattern channel. And we're back inside of it. Looking at Denison Mines, if you kind of draw it through here, I'm just looking at general trends here, and we are tightening up. We're continuing to tighten up. And if we continue to tighten up, I'd like to see a break to the upside, not the downside. We break this downside, we could see a good move lower, a good move, if that doesn't hold. Fission 3.0, we're going up in a channel here. So we're just channeling it out, kind of. We popped out a little bit here, but came right back into it with authority too. So it's holding good. The channel is, at least. Here's Sky Harbor. Again, we could be breaking down a little bit of a pullback, but nothing. I don't really see too much here. Canalaska, I can't say that this thing looks that strong, guys. If you look at the highs here, we're starting to see this thing kind of roll over. You got this line there. We've got this structure there, and what we got. Let me do this. Give me this guy here. Actually, it doesn't look bad either. So if we got this up there, this is there. What we could be doing is coiling up here. Something like that. So it actually looks fine. We just got to hold this lower line down here as this thing coils on up. We could be setting up for a very large move coming up soon if we break to the upside. Baseload's got a lead in. It's a big cup and handle that's forming. We got a break to the upside of $1.05, $1.10, somewhere in that range. And this is a reversal candlestick today. So hopefully we can get some momentum to the upside. Hopefully they can release some news on those drill results from the lab whenever they come out. Looking at ISO energy, I don't really see too much here. We came into a pattern here. And this is what I see here is this guy there. We kind of were coming back in this broadening structure pattern. Came down and then boosted up out of here. But we don't really have a pattern up here too much. You know, we've got like this guy going through there. But yeah, I don't see too much for a clear pattern anywhere in there. We've got energy fuels kind of broke out of this resistance line. We came up, maybe it's coming back to do a little bit of a retest, you know, do a little bit of a reunion before launching higher. So that's that one. We've got a URG here, and I don't like seeing these things contract into points. You can kind of see how this thing's contracting up. I hope we break to the upside, not the downside. UEC, you can see that we broke this kind of pattern there. We came out, retested, we're stepping higher, so that looks pretty good. UROY is getting a little bit of struggle. It's not me, Roy, it's you, Roy. That's for sure. And we're coming on up. We got this kind of broad structure that we broke there, came on up again, and we're tightening on up. And I will say this, okay? We did break to the downside. I'm going to be patient here and see what happens, because this is what happens sometimes, not all the time, but just sometimes. Sometimes you kind of pull this back, and people get they have like a bunch of stop losses here, and they get stop lossed out, and then this thing rallies back. It's like a huge short squeeze that just slingshots higher. Sometimes that happens, but we're going to have to wait and see what the rest of the week has in store for us. And another thing that I don't necessarily like to see here, and this is just something that I notice. So if we're going to draw this in here, we've got like this pattern coming up where it's tightening, right? And your volume's dropping down. That screams that this could potentially pull back by looking at the volume and how this thing's contracting up and how we're breaking to the downside. So that looks like a pullback to me. And I'm just looking at volume down here. It's kind of dropping off. Another thing that when you look at these charts is if things get tired, you see things start to slow in momentum. So we've got a move there, a smaller move there, and then a smaller move there, and then a smaller move there. And our highs, it's almost like a shoulder, head, shoulders developing. Or it could do something like that. And then we rebound up. Just something I'm noticing. Just something I'm noticing. Here's Forces Metals. May the forces be with you. Coming on up. And this thing's got a bunch of gold, I think, too. Let me throw it in here and see what we got. Now, what I'm seeing is this kind of pattern that's coming through here. Could maybe even run it through this way there. And we're coiling on up. Coiling on up. Is it going to break that way or that way? I don't know. But usually it's the lead-in, and it'll break to the upside usually. The statistical probability. It is slightly slanted upward, a teeny bit, which means that it could break to the downside. It's a tough one to read, depending on how you draw it in there. And deep yellow's got a slant upward too in this. I'm just drawing a whole bunch of these guys. So you guys can see kind of what I'm seeing. And you can see this like upward slant there. And I don't want to see the decline in volume, but we do have a decline in volume outside of these couple of weeks there. It is, in general, declining. That's your upward slope. If it gets tired and breaks to the downside, I mean, we could have a pretty large pullback. And we're seeing that in global atomic a little bit. You can kind of see it coming up there. Goviax still, I don't really see much of anything here. UEX, I'd like to stay above this trend line here, higher lows. I'd like to see a low put in here very soon, not a break to the downside. Here's international consolidated uranium. We are we're coming up into a pattern here. It is tightening up a little bit. Like to see it break to the upside, but these usually break to the downside and have pullbacks. National, we'll just say Kazatomprom. Again, I'm looking at the big move. A smaller move is contracting as it goes up. It's losing steam, and I think we're going to see a pullback. We saw something similar here as it lost steam here, and it kind of pulled back, and then we started over again. Here's it zoomed in, the big pullback, a move higher, a smaller move higher, a smaller move higher, a smaller move higher, a smaller move higher. I think we're probably going to see a little bit of a pullback here if we break this trend line coming up. It's contracting upward. And if I were to draw it just to show you guys real quick what this looks like, what I'm seeing is this, and a break to the downside potentially. And here's Peninsula Energy. I'm just kind of showing you guys what I look for in charts. Oops. So I'm looking kind of like that. See how that's upward and it's contracting upward? Just something I'm observing on all these charts. Here's Boss Energy. That's coming up. You can kind of draw it through here if you wanted to as well. Maybe. And Lotus is breaking to the downside, Lotus Resources. So this is probably going into pullback mode for a little bit. Valera Metals is on the right side so far. Let's see if it can remain there. Not too bad of a chart pattern and candlestick. That one looks pretty good. Western already broke to the downside, so you might see this come back up, give it a kiss goodbye, and head a little bit lower. It's possible. Lower high here as well. High, lower high. We're starting with a lower low, a new lower low, I should say. So we've got a lower low and a lower high, and then we'll see what happens. Forum Energy Metals sell off, consolidation, and another sell off here. We'll see how this thing rolls coming up. Paladin is still coming up into a pattern. This could potentially break to the downside. I mean, the rest of the sectors are doing that, so let's see. But right now, I'm getting a little bit bearish here, guys. I'm looking for a pullback here in the short term. As long as our long-term trend lines are holding, I will be long. If our long-term trend lines are not holding, then I'm going to be confused because we've got the market conditions behind us. We've got inflation. We've got real estate. Everything's in check. It's just maybe a little bit larger of a pullback. But when we get to the long-term trend lines, and we'll see if they hold. If they hold, everything's good. If we break, we may have a little bit larger pullback on our hands, a big consolidation period. Maybe uranium isn't ready yet. Maybe it needs a little bit more rest before we move higher again. If you guys like this content, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thank you for listening. This is Finding Value.